Great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sabrina Cofer, and on behalf of Choice and ACRL, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Combining Product Analytics and User Research to Improve Service and Design, which is sponsored by Elsevier. Today's discussion is one in a series of sponsored webinars from Choice and ACRL that addresses new ideas and developments of interest to the academic library community. Before we get started, I'd like to point out just a few features of the webinar software. All of the attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating any noise or feedback. We've got that taken care of for you. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. We are using the Q&A feature today. Please use it to ask questions of our speakers. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation, so please do type your questions in throughout as they occur to you. Also note there is closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the CC button on the bottom right corner of your screen. And last, please note that we are recording today's program and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archive version. And with that, we're ready to get started, so I will hand it over to Gwen.
Hello, I'm Gwen Evans, the Vice President of Global Library Relations here at Elsevier. Thank you for joining us today from wherever you are and whenever you are. And I'm very pleased to bring you Catherine McDonald, who is the head of UX research at Elsevier, to talk about what we know about user behavior on journal and book platforms. I recently was on a NISO book industry study group panel at ALA Annual on the book, Usage, Economics, and the Future. And I mentioned that in the digital universe, the platform is now the library. And what I mean by that is that so much user activity has moved completely out of the library to platforms or a chain of related platforms. Users start their search, refine it, browse for content, use different kinds of content across the platform or related platforms, decide what to do with that content, and increasingly may ask for help using that content, all on the platform and out of view of library staff. I should mention that as a former head of access services, I know that much of user behavior around print content is also a black box that is opaque to library staff. But the removal of any visible activity out of the library onto the platform is a new phenomenon. However, in the digital environment, users leave much more detailed traces of their journey. There's an enormous amount of anonymized information about how users interact with journal and book content on a platform like ScienceDirect. And we thought that presenting some of that information back to the library could help in a variety of ways. Information about user behavior contextualizes usage statistics for a better understanding of what those statistics may mean or not mean. We hope the audience gains insights that they may be able to use to refine or enhance library services related to digital content, or verify or challenge assumptions about user behavior on digital platforms. This information may suggest methodology or approaches that library staff can use on their own platforms. And finally, we invite more collaboration from library staff on behalf of users. If the platform has become the library in many senses, then bringing library expertise back into the digital library ensures we serve users well, and that's very important to us. So before I turn it over to Catherine, we have a brief poll for you to fill out. So poll number 1 is, have you done formal user research around the use of content in your institution or organization? Yes or no? And secondly, what kind of user research have you done? Choose all that apply. Have you done usability research, interviews, surveys, log analysis, or other digital platform aggregate activity analysis, or any other? And we'll just wait a few seconds for people to answer, and then we'll display the results for you. Oh, that's great that 62% have done formal user research. And most of you have answered that you do surveys followed by usability research and interviews. Okay, now I'm going to hand it over to Catherine, and she'll be talking about what we do at Elsevier for user research.
Thanks, Gwen. Next slide, please. Thanks, everyone. It's really great to be talking to you today. I'm really pleased to be able to share these insights, and I hope you find some of it useful. I see you've already been doing your own research, so that's really brilliant. But maybe you'll get some ideas for conducting other activities. So the most successful products are those that solve a problem or fulfill a need of some sort. And at Elsevier, I'm sure like at other publishers, we try and find out as much as possible about our users' needs and how they experience our products, so that we make products and features that are not only usable, but have real value for people. And we find out about our users' needs and behavior in several ways, which include product analytics, user research, and customer feedback. So this talk has 4 parts. In the first part, I'm going to give an overview of each method if you're not familiar with them. Then I'll show you some insights into how users use the 2 different content types on ScienceDirect, from analytics and user research. Then, as a kind of case study, I'll go through a story, the story of the topic pages. So on ScienceDirect, so topic pages consist of both books and journal content. And this is an offering that has changed its focus and adapted as a result of learning more about how it was being used and experienced for real. Then at the end, I have some suggested research questions that you could explore with user research techniques. Next slide, please. So how do we gain user insights at Elsevier? Firstly, I will show you some analytics and how we use them. So product analytics at Elsevier, what can we learn with this? At Elsevier, we use Adobe Analytics to measure and analyze behavior on most of our sites. And with this, we can learn about how many people use the site, how many return within a month, what are the most popular pages and features, for example. So we look at visits, we look at engagement, and we look at click-through rates. It's also really useful to measure traffic, so before and after a feature release, to see what effect that has had. So we're constantly monitoring this behavior. And we can see also how people move through a site and the most common paths taken. It also enables a greater level of analysis when we segment the entire user base. So for example, we can see anonymously if, for example, users who have signed in are more likely to perform a search. Or is someone who has used search in a session more or less likely to use the save search feature? Next slide, please. So this measurement gives us an awful lot of data, but it does have its limitations. So it doesn't tell us the whole story. We don't know from those figures whether someone did achieve their goal when they came to the site that day, or how easy or difficult they found it, or how do the experience compare to other sites that they use. It also doesn't tell us if there are any unmet needs out there that we're not providing for. So for this, to get the whole picture and understand in more depth, we do user research. Next slide, please. So for qualitative user research, this enables us to answer certain questions where we can learn about needs and users' pain points and workflow and any difficulties with an interaction. And this will tell us a lot and give us a lot of information that we use to improve our products and improve our offerings. So it's typically conducted with lower numbers, because to identify usability issues or understand workflows and pain points, we don't need large sample sizes. So some examples of qualitative user research are maybe contextual interviews. So these are typically conducted in a person's place of work. So maybe in the past, I've gone into labs and talked to scientists and asked them to show me how they do certain tasks, how they look at methods while they're working. And by observing actions and interviews, we can learn a lot about workflow and processes. We also part of qualitative user research is, of course, usability testing. So before releasing any new design or product, we will test it with users to find out if there are any usability issues in the interface or the designs or the screen flow that need to be fixed before release. We can also test ideas. So concept testing checks whether an idea someone may have for a new feature actually has value for people and would they use it before we go into an expensive development process. Next slide, please. Because we can't count qualitative data in the same way, we analyze it differently. So for contextual interviews, for example, we would take the transcripts or our notes and we'd highlight and pull out interesting insights and group these insights with others to make overall themes. Then we can present conclusions and make recommendations as part of the product development process. With quantitative user research, this will answer different questions. So we do this with higher numbers. So when we're asking about preferences or an aspect of an experience, we really do need a larger sample size to give a high confidence level. Some examples of this are demographic survey to find out who's using your product, what is their background, or a design preference. So an example from the past where we've rebranded a product, we've presented people with different design options and asked them to choose their preference and then gone with that. We also monitor satisfaction over time. So Scopus has a continuous little survey on it running, and this measures user satisfaction that we monitor. And if there's a drop, we can do further investigation. Or if we release something, we would hope to see it go up, for example, but this is something we keep an eye on. So there are limitations to this. As with qualitative research, we need to get access to people, and that can be time consuming to arrange. With quantitative user research, we need access to a user-facing channel. So we need to be able to email a big list of people, or we need to set it up on our product so that they can click through to a survey. The limitations of qualitative research are the resources of the user researcher, and again, access to people and being able to arrange with them to speak to them at a time that's convenient. It's not impossible though, because we do this regularly. Next slide, please. We also encompass other sources of insights as well. So an important one is feedback from customers via account management. And I'll talk about this a bit later with the topic page, but this can be a really important source of feedback during the normal account management contact. We get a lot of feedback from librarians and buyers and other customers. We also have a customer support center that people can email into or phone with questions or issues, and they'll be fed back into the product management domain. And on the site, we have a user feedback button on most products that allows people to click on it and give feedback or report problems. Next slide, please. So let's look at how people are using book and journal content on ScienceDirect. We'll look at analytics first. And for this, I asked our analytics team to do us a favor and I asked them certain questions that I thought might be interesting to people. And they went into Adobe Analytics and pulled out these figures for us that I'm going to show you today. So hopefully you'll find some of this interesting. So this first page shows us two things. It shows us the referrer site. That is the site that people come from right before arriving on ScienceDirect. And it also shows us the previous page. So I'll go through that in a minute. But both, as you can see there with the blue arrows, for both article and book page content, Google is the top referral source. And that's followed closely by internal products. So either within Elsevier or within ScienceDirect. So that means likely someone is doing a search and then coming straight to that page, be it an article page or a book page. In terms of the previous page, the article page is most frequently the previous page for the article page, followed closely by the recommended articles which are shown after a download. That differs from book content because the topics pages that I mentioned earlier are the most frequent previous page for books content. So that means they're a really good driver to get people to looking at books. Next slide, please. Let's look at how do people use search filters and if there is any difference. So this is the search results page on ScienceDirect. There are lots of filters down the left that you can narrow your search by. Date, you can look at content type or journal or subject. Next slide. So these figures show us that users filter their searches to article content more than book content, and that works out to be 38% of search filters are filtering to an article content as opposed to 6% of search filters. And you can also see in the order on the left what are the most popular filters overall. So it seems that people are wanting to narrow down to content from to the most recent content from 2022. Next slide, please. So how do people engage with the content? What do they do when they get to the page? What do they click on? So as for downloading the PDF, these figures show us that 28% of ScienceDirect customers who land on the article page click on the PDF button, as opposed to 11% of ScienceDirect customers who land on the book page. So that is quite a significant difference. Next slide, please. When viewing references, ScienceDirect customers are using reference links sort of similarly across journal and book content, although you could argue that one is double the other. But of visits to the book page, 6% clicked a reference link. Of visits to the article chapter page, 3% clicked a reference link. So that tells you where they're going on to and what is of most interest to them. And as for devices used, 80% of book content visits are on desktop compared to 75% of article page visits. Perhaps this means that researchers are reading articles on the go or on their commute, or maybe they're looking up something quickly on their phone in the lab. This is something we could investigate more with user research that we can't tell from these statistics. So we'll look now at how people use the topic pages. So if you're not familiar with the topic pages, this is an image of them on ScienceDirect. They contain both journal and book content, and they're made up of free excerpts which are selected automatically and displayed with, in most cases, an excerpt at the top which acts as a definition. There are around 10 excerpts on each page, I think, and users can click through to read the full article or the book chapter if they are subscribed. Next slide, please. So the referrer page for topics pages is most definitely Google. And so that is 78% of topic page visits are from Google. And I'll come back to this finding later, but this is absolutely not how we initially expected the pages to be accessed. How do people interact with the page? So these figures show broadly which links on the topic page are most used. ScienceDirect customers are most likely to click on View Chapter, followed by PDF download. This is a good indication, again, that people find this very useful to get through to books content. Next slide, please. The overall click-through rate for books and review article content on topic pages is 1.84%, which doesn't sound high, but given the enormous usage of these pages, it actually generates a lot of traffic to books and review articles. So that's what the analytics tell us. But what have we learned from user research? So I've brought together some insights from previous user research studies run by myself or other colleagues that help us understand researchers' use of different content types. Firstly, this study was done by my colleagues a few years ago, and they looked at how researchers make use of book and journal content. They talked to 19 postdoc researchers and PhD students in 4 institutes. And participants were asked to draw a timeline of their project and show when in their research they used literature most. Next slide. So this is what those timelines looked like. And when the user researchers compiled the findings, they were able to notice patterns in what had been described. Next slide. And putting them all together, they were able to build a model that looked like this. So researchers described using literature very heavily at the beginning of a project, and books and review article content was most prevalent here. Was the most prevalent of the sections here in order to understand a new field, or if they were writing a proposal. So this shows us that people were using books to get a foundational information to learn a new topic, and also review articles as well to find out what had been done already, by whom and how. They also used this period of high intensity of literature for writing proposals. Then as a project is underway, literature use was less intensive, but it was still frequently accessed throughout the life of the project, where people would regularly do searches in order to look things up, such as methods, techniques, and stay up to date for lab meetings, or just to generally ensure what was going on with that subject as they went through the project. The end of the project, again, is a heavy usage time for literature, mainly articles and less again for books. So where people are clarifying things, making sure they're not missing anything, or gathering references for their paper that they're writing. Next slide, please. In another series of testing projects in 2016 and 17, we were testing designs for book pages. And while we were doing that, we asked users, for what reasons would you turn to a book over a journal article? And here are some comments from that. So this one on the top right, I like, it's a nice summary. Someone said, papers speculate and give possibilities and theorize, whereas after 5 years, it becomes established fact in a book. Or books are broader, they have more accessible language, written by an expert in the field. But when you're building your own story, getting more detailed, you need more recent reviews and data becomes more relevant to scope what's out there. Or someone described using books to look up specific chapters on the latest developments. So the hot melt extrusion as a method, I'm guessing, because articles aren't usually just on the instrumentation. So this person needed to learn a method for that. Next slide, please. Then we have a couple of comments about how books are easier to read and better at explaining. So an article is more concentrated. If you don't know a subject, then I would go to a book. It's explained better, and I can see related subjects. I go to books to feel more secure, I'll understand it. Books are easier to read, articles are more compressed. Books are good for explaining points and good if you're starting out a PhD or a new topic. I don't read them cover to cover, but go to the parts I'm interested in. So these comments back up what was found in the earlier user research project. Then there's one comment more on the negative side, which is a perception that books can be outdated. So this person goes to review papers instead. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to show you how learning from analytics and user research directly led to evolving and improving a prominent feature on ScienceDirect, which was topics pages. In 2012, an open-ended user research project was undertaken to understand the workflows and pain points of neuroscientists. One of the things discovered was that people were regularly reading papers and not understanding all the terms discussed, or that they would come across concepts or terminology in a paper that they wanted to understand or understand better. Neuroscience is very multidisciplinary, and the teams researched 4 or 5 different specializations working together, but all trying to understand each other enough to contribute to the research. And the behavior observed was that while reading an article, if they came across a term they wanted to know more about, they would select the text of up to 3-word phrase like synaptic transmission and just Google it, or they would look that up in Wikipedia. Next slide, please. So we took these findings, and from this, a concept was developed and eventually launched to offer researchers high quality, authoritative information about those terms that we took from our books that would save people the step of looking them up while they were reading the paper. So these topic pages were linked to directly from the article page. The term was underlined, and it was just a case of clicking on the term and going straight to the topic page. It quickly became a very successful feature, with them soon reaching 500 clicks a month. Next slide, please. But bearing in mind our finding that Google was a highly used tool for looking up scientific concepts, in order to improve the search engine discovery, we changed the URL from topics.sciencedirect.com to sciencedirect.com/topics. This might sound like a subtle change, but this led to a significant increase in traffic from search engines. So what started with 25,000 views from Google a month got up to 25 million within a few years. And from analytics, we discovered 2 things. A lot of the new traffic was not identifiable as customer traffic. So we couldn't associate visits with customer accounts. And while we presumed that maybe a lot of this traffic was general Google users, we believed that a significant percentage was coming from customers that we couldn't identify because, for example, it was a mobile being used not on the IP range of the institution. The second thing we noticed was a lot of the visits we could identify as customers were new visits coming to ScienceDirect for the first time. So to complete this understanding, we needed to do some user research. So we ran a very simple demographic survey, asking people to identify roughly who they were and what they were using the information for. It turned out that our original use case, giving advanced researchers easy access to foundational information to get up to speed on unfamiliar concepts, was now proportionally only a small part of how these pages were being used. Far more common, and as shown in this chart, was undergraduates and graduate level students doing coursework, also high school students doing homework. Smaller proportionally, but very interesting to us, was a significant number of clinicians looking for point of care content, and also corporate researchers doing R&D. This was also evidenced in the analytics, with corporate researchers being much more likely than academic users to enter on a topic page. So what we had expected to be a small feature was now the second most common point of entry to all of ScienceDirect after the article pages. And it was introducing a set of new users and use cases to ScienceDirect, and had become an important part of the open scientific information landscape. It had also become a fixture on the first page of Google for many important scientific concepts. Next slide, please. A further user survey confirmed the reasons for the increase in usage. And here are just some of the comments about why people found the page useful. So this person mentions it saves time and helps build connections in their knowledge. Next slide, please. This second person again mentions the multidisciplinary use case. And these comments were both from undergraduate students in their institutions. A further user need was brought to us by account managers and customer consultants. So their librarian contacts were asking us to help them share this resource with their students and patrons, and to make it a starting point for these new kinds of users to do their work. This didn't necessarily fit in with how the use of this page was originally conceived, but in response to the feedback, we created a topic homepage to allow librarians and educators to better demonstrate the topic pages and navigate to it more easily. So we designed, developed, tested and launched the topic homepage, which I think launched last month. And we continue to measure the topic page's effectiveness for these new use cases. Next slide, please. So to finish off, I have just a few suggestions that you could conduct your own user research to answer. So to understand current behavior with the library website or other tool, you can recruit a range of user types, ask them to maybe bring their own laptop and sit with them and get them to show you how they use your different services. In doing so, ask open and neutral questions and observe while they're doing so. Do they have any workarounds for any problems or difficult tasks? What sites do they have bookmarked on the laptop? Do they have any unmet needs that they talk about that you could potentially solve for? You can also test new features or designs, so recruit potential users of these services and then give them a mock-up or prototype, or could even be a screenshot or a scrappy drawing on a piece of paper. Also done that. Ask them to go through a typical task and how they would expect to complete that and think aloud. So notice any areas they're confused or they struggle with. Then you can make or recommend changes to solve these. You can also understand your users' most important jobs. You could send an email, a survey by email, or have an in-product invitation to a survey and just ask, what did you come to the library site for today to accomplish? You could also even ask if they were able to accomplish their task, and if so, how easy or difficult did they find it? And get more information that way. If they mention several tasks, you can ask them to order in priority, so you can learn about what's the most important to them. If you'd like to learn more, these are some things that I really recommend. The Nielsen Norman Group has a site which has a lot of free instructional content on it. It's great. I subscribe to the weekly newsletter that has articles out every week, but it has a lot of how-to information on it. It's a really good resource. And this book, Just Enough Research by Erica Hall, I always recommend people because it's a small, short read, and it really does give the essential information without going into too much detail. Also, just to mention, if you are interested in being part of the process, I have a couple of team members who are about to start projects researching with librarians. So it's not just users we talk to. So if you were interested, do get in touch and I can plug you into that part of the process. But thank you very much for your time, and I hope you found some of that interesting.
Okay, thank you so much, Catherine. Yeah, we have plenty of time for questions, and we already have some in the Q&A, so I just encourage attendees, if you haven't asked a question yet, feel free to do so. And we'll just jump right in. We have a question here from Kara, who says, do your statistics distinguish between repeat and unique visitors? If it doesn't, should this be a cause of concern when improving user experience?
Yes, it does. And they can put various constraints around what is meant by a repeat user as well. So we can track monthly active users, and I think I mentioned that we'd noticed new users coming in, and in that case, new user meant new in the last 6 weeks. So yeah, they can put all levels of understanding on that. So that is really good to perceive that indeed is necessary. Yeah.
Okay, great. And let's see, we have another question here from Corey, who says, use of literature should vary by fields. Did you check for this?
It does, and that's a really interesting question to dive into, actually, because we know from what I haven't done myself is a research project specifically looking at that and come up with a thorough answer. However, what I have found in doing all sorts of user research is that fields do vary indeed. For example, we know that someone, for example, researching in CRISPR technology is so fast moving that they don't even wait for the published literature. They mainly use bioRxiv and preprint servers. In a different way, computer science relies a lot on conference proceedings. So yeah, it is interesting to look into. What we don't do in ScienceDirect is adapt our articles designed to different subjects. We don't do that, but that is something I would like to look more into. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, interesting. Okay, we have another question here from Stuart, who asks, hi, or first says, hi, we assisted with the Adobe implementation on ScienceDirect and Scopus for behavioral analytics. Do you use weighting methodologies to blend user research / panel data, for example, user demographics, with behavioral data for more balanced / accurate representation across all users? If so, can you share how you decide on such weightings?
I am now wishing that participants weren't muted, because I would love Stuart to explain this a bit more, actually. To blend user research, panel data, user demographic with behavioral data. I don't think we do blend it in that way, if I'm understanding your question correctly. It's more a case of, I suppose, how I've gone through the topic page case study. They are two different sources of information. So we'll look at analytics data, and we'll also do user research to kind of answer slightly different questions. I don't think that answers your question, but maybe you can get in touch afterwards and we can discuss.
Yeah. Oh, okay. It looks like Stuart added some more context.
He did, yeah.
Okay. So for example, you might have certain user types more likely to respond and others not. How do you counter this?
Okay. So you mean in people who would kind of accept an invite for user research interview, I guess. Yes, that's true. We try and cast the net as widely as possible. So yeah, we try and recruit different nationalities and genders and subjects as best we can. It's for sure not an exact science. We can say that qualitative research, if I'm usability testing a site, for example, what I'm basically testing is human perception and how the human brain works more than anything else. So we can rely on that for qualitative data. For analytics, we can segment by country and see what's happening in different countries. I was just looking at before I came on, actually, out of our customers, most of our customers on ScienceDirect, and at the top 5 in order are the China, US, UK, India, and Germany. And that will make up the analytics in that order. So if we're looking at certain questions, for example, who uses search more often, what I was really interested to see was that users in China use search more often. And from that, we can start to think about why that might be and come to the conclusion it's quite possibly to do with the search engines being not as widely used there. So yeah, we look at segments and we can make conclusions based on that. And for user research, we'll try and mitigate as much as best we can.
Great. Okay.
I'll take a note of your email address. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Let's see, we have another question here from Amy who asks, what do you consider a satisfactory response rate for qualitative and/or quantitative user research? And do you value the insights relative to what users reply, how many reply, etc.?
Do I value the insights relative to what? Okay, so a satisfactory response rate for qualitative, I'll take the standard one first. So if we're testing an interface, I think we can safely say we've got most of the usability issues with about 5 to 7 users, be they PhD students or be they professors. If we are looking into user needs, then what I would want to do is ensure that we have covered different user groups. So I would want to look specifically at PhD students, and I would want to look specifically at professors, because their needs are going to differ, and they may differ between countries, etc. Did that answer that question? Do you value the? I'm not quite sure how to answer that second part. Yeah, if only few people have said a thing in a survey, then we can safely consider it probably an edge case. But for quantitative user research, we'll try and get 100 responses at least to our surveys.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that helps. Okay, let's see. Another question here says, tell me more about the differences between research focusing on large-scale analysis of user patterns across the sites and more time and resource-intensive qualitative research, such as user interviews. What drives the decision to invest more in qualitative research?
I can't see that question actually. Where can I read that? Thank you.
I'll resend it here. There we go. Okay, it's in the chat there.
Okay, yeah. So for large-scale analysis of user patterns, yeah, this is something it's ongoing. It's already set up in the products. It's kind of always running. So we can keep informing ourselves whenever we need that information. Intensive qualitative research like user interviews. So our user researchers at Elsevier are embedded with the product teams really, and the UXers, the user experience designers. So what that means is that a user researcher will work really closely with product managers and user experience designers together to understand a problem space, to decide what ought to be built next on the roadmap, and to test those designs. So it's really a conversation, an ongoing conversation that happens with between all those people, depending on the business priorities. And if there's a big question or a big unknown, then between that group, will agree that user research is required. So because we've got these embedded user researchers, it doesn't have to be something that's kind of commissioned from a central group or even an outside agency. It's just a natural part of the product development process.
Great. Okay. Yeah, just a reminder to those out there, if you have a question, feel free to send it in. We have another one here that I'll read out. These platforms are global platforms with users across the globe. Are there any differences in user behavior in different geographical regions, whether usage patterns or qualitative research?
Yeah, that's a good question actually, because this morning I would have said no, but then I learned about the search behavior in China, so that's interesting. In terms of kind of qualitative research, not really, because as I mentioned, humans are humans in different countries. They may have different constraints, however. So, for example, in India, where network coverage can be very poor, there's a higher reliance on apps as opposed to websites. So that will kind of enforce a certain user behavior. So that's things like that are really interesting to delve into and to understand.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, we have another question here that's more about user privacy. So what about protecting user privacy and doing this sort of research and analysis?
Yeah. So taking the analytics first, that's all anonymized. We can't see a user ID at all. We can segment to country, and we know if someone's a customer or not. But it doesn't go further than that. When we invite people to user research interviews, naturally, we're going to be taking a lot of personal data, name, email address, and such like, and that is necessary. But we have processes around that to fit in with GDPR compliance that requires us to adhere to certain standards, and we have our own processes. If somebody contacted us and asked for their data to be removed, we have processes around that. So yeah, it's all necessary. It's important, but we have things in place to deal with it. Yeah.
Great. Okay. We have another question here that refers back to that pie chart. And it says, your pie chart showed the segmentation of user types.
Yeah.
How did you determine that undergraduates, for example, were using topic pages?
Yeah, so it was a really kind of simple survey. Actually, we ran an in-product survey, I think somehow launched on the site. Either we coded it ourselves or we used something like Pendo. And that linked people to a larger survey. And in that survey, as briefly as possible, we asked people to define their role, their user role, and we gave them a list to choose from. And as you can see, that's how they answered that. And then in that same survey is we also asked them what they'd come to the site to do. So we could match those two things. So we could see the most common tasks, for example, for undergraduates, and put those two things together.
Great. Okay. Let's see, another one here. You mentioned gathering information from in-product help and feedback buttons. What are the kinds of information do you get through those methods?
Yeah. So in-product help and feedback buttons, you've probably seen these on other sites you've used. People can click on it and give any sort of feedback. And it really is any sort of feedback as well. But occasionally we will get really helpful information, like there's a bug or something's broken. Recently, I think this year, the ScienceDirect site for certain part of the region stopped being able to download PDFs, which is obviously pretty catastrophic. So we were able to be alerted to that. It's also alerted us of bugs on with certain browsers on a topic page that we hadn't been aware of otherwise. It hadn't come up in our testing. Another thing on the topic page, we started to get a lot of comments about the readability of that page, and the way it's designed is actually in kind of bricks, 2-column format, and it became clear that that wasn't really very popular. So we have plans in place to alter that design, really as a result of that feedback. So yeah, it can be very helpful. It can also be very random, but I guess it's the signal and the noise thing. You have to keep looking at it in order to find the really good insights.
Definitely. Okay, well, for our attendees, any other questions, feel free to send them in. We are going to send out one last poll question here. So I will send that out. And it says, are you considering use of any of the discussed approaches on your own platforms? Such as we talked about usability research, interviews, surveys, log analysis, or other digital platform aggregate activity analysis. So feel free to send in a response. Give it a couple more seconds. Okay, let's see. Okay, so it looks like usability research is the top one at 55%, and then surveys at 51%, log analysis or other digital platform aggregate at 49%, interviews 43%, and then none last. Okay, interesting.
Has that gone up from the first poll? I can't remember what the original results were.
Yeah, I think, let's see. From the first poll, surveys was the top one that people have already implemented. So yeah.
Brilliant.
Great. Okay. Okay, looks like we got another question here from Kendra, who asks, do you allow for / adjust data for the bias of only a certain type of user participating in user research? And then in parentheses, difference between a user who is willing to answer a survey versus unwilling / unlikely to?
I would say it depends on what we are trying to find out. Yes. So I think I mentioned earlier, we just try and cast the net as widely as possible. In fact, some research has just been going on with people who said they disliked a certain service, so we invited them to participate in a survey. But of course, we also wanted to hear from people who said nothing or didn't dislike it. So we have to go back and recruit for those people again. So it is difficult. But again, I think it depends on the research question. If I am trying to understand the usability of something, that won't necessarily matter. That person who doesn't want to answer a survey can still benefit from the answers given by somebody else. But I agree that, if somebody's unwilling to answer a survey about, say, a preference test of a design, then that won't be counted. However, maybe that means they're not particularly engaged and don't have a strong opinion about the design. So I guess we try and mitigate as much as possible, but it's not 100% ever, I don't think, with any of this.
Okay, got it. Okay, I think that's all of the questions we have. So I'll start to wrap up here. And if anyone has any final questions, please send them in. But I'll just say, thank you so much to Catherine for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you to Gwen for introducing the discussion. And thank you to our attendees for your questions and your comments. I'd like to remind our viewers that we did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Choice and ACRL with a link to the recording. Also, if you have a few minutes after the presentation to fill out a brief survey, I would really appreciate it. Your responses help improve our presentations. Okay, and I think, thanks. I think we're at the end. So I'll just say again, thanks all of you out there for joining us. We hope you learned something new from the session and hope to see you again in the near future on another webinar.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone.